Welcome to Asian ID at first glance. Heartbeat, message read but unreplied feels like another warm urban healing romance wrapped in soft lighting, playful banter, and the familiar comfort of two wounded people slowly falling in love. Yet why does this short drama leave behind a strangely deeper emotional aftertaste once the sweetness fades away? Perhaps because beneath its gentle tone and light comedic rhythm, the drama quietly reveals a new emotional survival logic increasingly desired by modern urban audiences. Doesn't it? Not dependence, not sacrifice, not the old fantasy of one perfect person rescuing another completely, but something far more realistic and emotionally mature called collaborative independence. Isn't that the real heartbeat hidden beneath the stories? Hae Yiying and Charon reunite once again in this emotionally layered urban romance, but unlike traditional healing dramas built around savior fantasies, their characters do not enter each other's lives as heroes descending from the sky. Do they? Zhai Yiying, played by Zhai Yiying, is a popular actress whose life collapses after suffering sexual harassment from an award-winning actor before becoming the target of cruel online attacks. And isn't it painfully reflective of how public opinion often destroys women faster than it protects them? Meanwhile, Shenji, portrayed by Charon, has locked himself away from the world for 3 years, silenced by severe social anxiety and emotional isolation so deep that even speaking feels unbearable. And how many people today secretly recognize elements of themselves inside that suffocating withdrawal? Their lives should never have crossed paths naturally. Yet a strange contractual arrangement suddenly binds them together through mutual healing. And isn't it fascinating how modern love stories increasingly begin not with destiny, but with emotional necessity? What makes the drama emotionally refreshing is that Zhai Yiying is not written as a helpless victim waiting passively for protection. Because even after public humiliation and emotional trauma, she still actively searches for solutions rather than collapsing into complete dependency. Doesn't she? She accepts the responsibility of helping Shenji heal while simultaneously trying to rebuild herself, creating a character whose resilience feels active rather than decorative, and perhaps that is why audiences respond so strongly to her energy. Isn't it? Zhai Yiying brings an especially lively emotional sharpness to the role, balancing emotional scars with a fearless social confidence that allows her to confront problems head-on instead of drowning inside them. And doesn't that combination make her feel more like a real modern woman than many idealized romance heroines? Her quick wit, emotional directness, and stubborn optimism create the feeling of someone who has already suffered deeply yet still refuses to surrender her personality to pain. And isn't that quiet refusal itself a form of strength? Charon's portrayal of Shenji works precisely because he avoids turning social anxiety into exaggerated fragility or theatrical sadness, choosing instead to communicate emotional fear through restraint, hesitation, and subtle behavioral details that gradually soften over time. Doesn't he? Watching Shenji slowly move from silence toward emotional courage feels less like watching someone being fixed by love and more like witnessing a person relearning trust through consistent emotional safety. And isn't that distinction incredibly important? Too many healing romances rely on a simplistic imbalance where one character endlessly gives while the other endlessly receives, creating a savior versus rescued structure that often limits emotional growth for both sides. Don't they? But Heartbeat, message read but unreplied quietly rejects that formula by allowing both characters to become caregivers and wounded souls simultaneously. And perhaps that is where its emotional intelligence truly shines. Isn't it? Zhai Yiying offers Shenji warmth, structure, and social reconnection, yet Shenji also protects her emotionally in return, shielding her from external pressure through tenderness, attentiveness, and quiet emotional loyalty. And doesn't that reciprocity make their relationship feel far healthier than traditional dependency narratives? Their connection evolves into something less like romantic rescue and more like functional partnership rooted in emotional cooperation, where both people remain independent individuals while still relying on each other meaningfully. And isn't that increasingly what modern audiences long to see reflected on screen? Because in reality, many adults no longer believe completely in fairy tale rescue fantasies, especially after experiencing careers, emotional burnout, social pressure, and loneliness firsthand. Do they? What people often crave now is not a perfect savior who erases all suffering instantly, but someone willing to stand beside them while they struggle through life together. And perhaps this drama understands that emotional shift better than many larger productions. Doesn't it? The contract at the center of the story becomes symbolic precisely because it begins as practical cooperation before slowly transforming into genuine emotional intimacy, suggesting that trust is not born magically through fate alone, but built gradually through shared effort. Isn't that true? Even the drama structure reflects this emotional philosophy, because the emotional line and career line progress side by side rather than treating personal ambition as something secondary to romance. And doesn't that feel far more aligned with contemporary urban life? The absence of traditional villains also changes the atmosphere significantly, because instead of relying on exaggerated external conflict, the drama focuses more on internal healing, emotional communication, and the small acts of support that slowly rebuild damaged people, doesn't it? Of course, the series is not flawless, because certain logical gaps surrounding Shenji's background allotment feel underexplained, while excessive filters and repetitive close-up shots occasionally weaken immersion, and doesn't visual over-stylization sometimes undermine emotional realism rather than enhance it? Compared with Wild Lotus Grows in Desolation, the dramatic tension may feel slightly softer and less emotionally explosive, yet the emotional interactions here often feel more natural and sustainable, which perhaps makes the healing aspects resonate more deeply over time. Wouldn't you agree? What makes this drama especially interesting is how closely its emotional logic mirrors modern workplace collaboration culture, because healthy professional environments today increasingly depend on independent individuals learning how to cooperate effectively rather than compete endlessly or rely passively on leadership. Don't they? A struggling project team succeeds not when one genius solves everything alone, but when multiple people contribute strengths while adapting to each other's weaknesses constructively. And isn't emotional partnership fundamentally similar? The drama subtly suggests that love itself may function best not as emotional dependence, but as collaborative growth between two people capable of supporting each other without erasing themselves entirely. And isn't that idea surprisingly progressive for a short-form romance? Modern young adults increasingly pursue independence while simultaneously fearing emotional isolation, creating a generation trapped between self-protection and the longing for connection. And perhaps that contradiction explains why collaborative independence feels so emotionally appealing today, doesn't it? Even outside romance, society repeatedly proves that meaningful cooperation often produces stronger outcomes than isolated individualism, whether in creative industries, scientific research, or even archaeological projects like the collaborative excavation work surrounding Zhangxingdu archaeological discoveries, where multiple experts combine different skills toward a shared goal. Isn't that a fitting parallel? Still, collaborative independence is not automatically easy or stable, because relationships built on mutual growth also require constant communication, emotional flexibility, and the ability to adjust when one person evolves faster than the other, don't they? The drama hints at this challenge through inconsistencies in Shenji's development arc, and in real life, such imbalances can destabilize partnerships when one side suddenly changes emotionally, professionally, or psychologically faster than expected, can't they? Perhaps that is why modern emotional relationships increasingly require negotiation rather than fantasy, because love alone no longer guarantees compatibility unless both individuals remain willing to evolve together consciously. Isn't that the difficult truth? The growing popularity of warm healing dramas like this suggests something significant about urban emotional culture today, because audiences seem less interested in passive rescue fantasies and more drawn toward stories where both people actively participate in each other's healing process. Don't they? Maybe true emotional maturity begins when people stop waiting endlessly for someone to save them completely and instead learn how to grow stronger while still allowing others to walk beside them. Wouldn't that change everything? And perhaps hidden beneath this gentle short drama is a quietly haunting realization modern audiences cannot ignore anymore. Namely that the deepest form of love may not be losing yourself for another person, but learning how two independent people can survive the cruelty of the world together without either one disappearing in the process. Isn't that the real miracle? Thank you for watching the video. See you again.